Good morning, everybody. It's Monday, not Tuesday, Monday at 10. I'm Matt Lewis. He's Charlie Sykes. Charlie, how you doing,
But
man?
we got to get a jump on this week, you know?
Yeah.
And once again, we have to apologize for not having enough to talk about, right? No, actually, it was a gruesome weekend, wasn't it? And
Yeah.
can I just,
Depressing.
I don't know if you know this, but the one thing I've always hated doing the morning after a mass shooting is talking about the mass shooting because it feels like we get into these doom loops of the same thing over and over again. When I used to do live radio, those were the mornings that I just hated.
Yes.
After then, and of course, they're so frequent. But I mean, we have so much here. We have the Brown University shooting. We have the Australian massacre of Jews. We have the apparent murder of Rob Reiner.
Yeah. So weird. It reminds me a little bit of oh, um, who was it that there was another famous actor, right? He was in the Royal Tannenbaums, who died with his wife like a year ago, which is always weird. These guys are like 70, 75 years old, very famous. And then it's obviously not, a coincidence
No,
when you hear that they're both dead. Gene
and
Hackman,
actually,
right?
I
Gene
have a
Hackman.
very, very small connection here, which, lay out. By the way, happy Hanukkah for those of you who celebrate. I mean, today is the first day of Hanukkah. Very, very, very small connection with Rob Reiner. He was a very, very outspoken anti-Trump figure. I mean, tried to mobilize Hollywood and was very active. And back in that first year, I think in 2017, he actually called me and said, would I serve on this advisory committee of some sort? And at that point, of course, I was saying yes to everybody. Um, I don't know that I advised anyone, or that we ever met or ever did anything, but it was memorable. Actually chatting with Rob Reiner, but he was deeply committed and very, very upset about what was going on, and like so many people struggling, how to find a voice, how to push back on it. So it is a terrible tragedy. I don't want to make any judgments about it. The suggestions are that this has nothing to do with politics in any way whatsoever. That it's a family tragedy, but once again, we have
Yeah,
these outbursts of real violence that reminds us that the world's on edge. And
it
what happened in
is.
Australia was just unspeakable.
Yeah. Well, and let me just say, I mean, here, Charlie, you and I have been talking about A Few Good Men almost every week. That's a movie that he directed,
Mhm.
Spinal Tap, When Harry Met Sal. There's
Mhm.
so many.
Princess Bride.
Princess Bride. I mean, obviously, I think all of us sort of first came to know him as Meathead on All in the Family. I didn't really like him back then. I remember that. I remember, and then, there's rom-coms. I was like in my 20s and he's doing these like rom-coms and it just wasn't my thing and it seemed very liberal but I just came over the years to really respect, I mean, the quality, Stand By Me, another classic film, coming of age movie, the quality, and then his humor, like in The Wolf of Wall Street, where he plays Leonardo DiCaprio's dad. He was just, yeah, I really gained an affinity, and he's one of the people I really wish never got a chance to meet him. I wish I had.
Yeah, and then what an amazing family. His father Carl Reiner was, a legend, and a dominant figure for decades. So a very, very talented guy, and a very serious thinker. I mean, he was not. I think that sometimes, there's that tendency to think, Hollywood people are all very, very, shallow, and that maybe they should just, shut up and make movies. He was actually quite thoughtful in his approach, and very, very passionate. So, and I'm sorry, that. I mean, what can you say when there's a tragedy like this?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, I just think for all of us out there, I mean, on one hand, it's the Christmas season, but it's also the darkest time of year. I mean, literally the darkest. We're getting less sunlight than ever. Just, the winter solstice. And then you've got just the political environment, which has been toxic for a decade, but it hasn't gotten any better recently. And then just the weekend that we just endured. And so I mean, we try, we go to church, we spend time with family, we tune out occasionally and listen to watch football or whatever. But man, it's hard out there to stay positive and not become depressed if you're just watching the news, God forbid.
Well, that's right, but it feels like it's been like that way for some time. So can we talk about Australia for just a moment?
Let's
With
do it. Let's do it. Yeah.
at the risk of doing it, David Frum has a piece in the Atlantic where he talks about. I think the headline is "The Intifada Comes to Bondi Beach: The Hanukkah Massacre of Australian Jews." And what he points out is, this obviously is a horrible case, but there have been so many warnings, and it has been building. And he said it's long past time to stop saying anti-Semitic violence has no place in our society when it obviously does. And in Australia, and of course, I wasn't aware of this. There had been so many warnings and so many threats. You might remember, 2 days after the October 7th Hamas terror attack on Israel, there was a demonstration in Sydney that included a chant of, and I apologize in advance, fuck the Jews. Dozens more demonstrations followed across the country. So there were threats, there were indications that this was not just rhetorical. And Australian authorities, I don't think, took them quite seriously enough. But this is real. I mean, and the point he makes is that when you say things like, and here we're gonna step on some toes. You say things like globalize the intifada. That has meaning for some people. It is dangerous. And when you see these kinds of things, said and David Fromreich, when people chant, intifada revolution, they're revealing something important about their goals and their methods. Yet in many Western countries, public authorities have been reluctant or unwilling to hear the message. I mean, remember back in May what happened? We had this pro-Palestinian activist assassinated two people on the street in downtown Washington, D.C. And he said, I did it for Palestine, I did it for Gaza. Look, I mean, I am not a supporter of Israeli policy in Gaza, but I do think that we need to take this culture of violence and threat seriously. When people say globalize the intifada or the intifada revolution, I think we ought to hear what they're telling us.
Totally, Charlie. And I have to say, this is a global problem,
Mm,
an international problem, but it's a problem here in America too. And we've gotten to the point. I was just listening to who's the streamer, the famous streamer who's related to Cenk Uygur. Um, Somebody in the comments will tell me. Very famous left wing streamer who's been accused of being not Medi. Anyway, someone will tell me. Anyway, this guy was making this point, which I totally agree with, which is like if you want to become, and we know that the left has a problem with
mm,
anti-Semitism, right? Obviously, certain elements of the left, um, but the right increasingly, like if you want to be a famous podcaster or
mm.
streamer, it's like the best way to do it is to basically become anti-Semitic. And I mean,
Oh,
look at
talk.
Candace Owens. My old boss Tucker is definitely
Fuentes,
flirting
Tucker
with this.
Carlson, very
Nick,
much.
Fuentes certainly going down that path. So I mean, and honestly, this streamer, whose name will come to me eventually, was saying that
Hassan
like
Piker, is that something like that?
that's it, Hassan. Yeah. So my apology. I don't know Monday morning. If you thought I was bad on Tuesdays, Monday mornings they're going to be even worse. But this Hassan was making the point that like Ben Shapiro is basically kind of losing market share and certainly losing, you know, his dominance in right wing podcasting and YouTube and all that, based on the fact that like he obviously can't outflank anybody on anti-Semitism, right? This is the one area where there's a perception that it's a vulnerability for him. And if you're on the right and you view Shapiro as a competitor and you want to get his, viewers and listeners, you make this a prominent issue. So it's very bad, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, there was you feed oxygen to people who had normally been excommunicated from the right. I mean, part of this is this horseshoe theory again. For people who hate both sides, isn't the horseshoe theory that you have anti-Semitism on the left and anti-Semitism on the right, and don't be surprised when it breaks out into violence. I mean, this is the paradox of Donald Trump. I mean, he's got a Jewish son-in-law, a Jewish daughter,
Mhm.
Jewish grandchildren, and yet one of the things that he has done is he's opened the door to many of the anti-Semitic mouth breathers out there. And, he and JD Vance have refused to basically draw a bright red line and say, no, you can't come. And quite frankly, I think that on the left, there's been too much tolerance. for some of the kind of rhetoric that we have seen. Um, and this is the weird thing about the toxicity of anti-Semitism is that as you get further to the extremes and you indulge in conspiracy theories, sooner or later, it's the Jews, right? They're going to
Yes,
blame the Jews for
inevitably.
everything. Yeah, it seems to
Inevitably.
go that
Yep.
way. Yeah.
Which is the crazy thing. Nick Fuentes says that he was radicalized by listening to Mark Levin's radio show. And then Mark Levin was talking about like the replacement theory or something, but not in terms of Jews. But anyway, it became
So,
that was the gateway drug for him. He
well,
says, who knows?
yeah. Well, so since we're on the subject of violence, and and political violence and assassinations, um, sort of going to back into this. One of the strongest voices against anti-Semitism is Barry Weiss, at the Free Press and the new editor-in-chief of CBS News. She is very, very outspoken on this issue. Um, but over the weekend, she did that CBS televised town hall with Erica Kirk. And by the way, look, people process grief in different ways, and I am not gonna dump on her. But it was interesting that so CBS devotes this hour to Erica Kirk, who's talking about faith, grief, political violence. She's asked specifically, are you willing to condemn Donald Trump, calling for the execution, the hanging of his political opponents? And she would not do it. She would not say his name, which again, what a big surprise. And she was asked very explicitly about that. But people should check out my newsletter because, and I don't belabor the point here, but I asked the question, okay, so CBS devotes this big high profile thing to Charlie Kirk. Charlie Kirk who's won the Medal of Freedom, that we have all of this national security apparatus now, mobilized because of his killing. Where is the network televised town hall for Melissa Hortman? Now people are going, oh, Melissa, former Democratic Speaker of the House in Minnesota. She and her husband were assassinated this year. They were murdered. A Democratic state senator and his wife were shot. Where, where, where's the town hall for her? I mean, it's just like, so are we going to be selective in this political assassination is the worst thing that's ever happened in America? But here you have the Speaker of the House, former Speaker of the House in Minnesota, gunned down in her home, her husband murdered. And right now, probably, and look, I'm not trying to dunk on anybody. People are scratching their, oh, yeah, what about that? So Barry White's going to sit down with one of the survivors there, people who have been touched by that, because that was political assassination of an elected official. And yet, right now, since then, essentially crickets. And you
Yeah.
look back on 2025, and I think that when we go through the year, people go, oh, yeah, yeah, remember that?
Yeah. It'll be almost a footnote, though,
Yeah,
unfortunately, for various
tragically,
reasons. Um,
tragically.
Look, Troy, I'm of the opinion that like people,
Today.
Barry Weiss, Ben Shapiro, the aforementioned Mark Levin, that there are Jewish conservatives who um, decided for some reason that they had to be with Trump. Um, Maybe it's business reasons, or maybe it's just whatever. A lot of Republicans have just made that decision. Marco Rubio made that, whatever it is. But again, with Rubio, probably business, probably business reasons as well. But for whatever reason, but it's I don't think it's an argument they can. So I think that they are actually helping perpetuate an anti-Semitism that will come for them. This is my personal opinion, but I believe that Donald Trump, and you already noted that Donald Trump has a Jewish son-in-law. His daughter, I believe, converted to Judaism. And a lot of people even say that Donald Trump, his demeanor, his whole shtick, is sort of like a Catskills Jackie Mason routine. That Trump
That's
came up in
JD.
that environment. But whatever the case may be, I think it's just undeniable that Donald Trump helped unloose
Yeah.
a lot of toxicity in America, including anti-Semitism in America, normalize it, platform it, all of that, inspire it. And these people like Barry Weiss, who are refusing to, and I know Erica Kirk too, kind of refusing to condemn Trump or to criticize Trump, and they're part of his coalition. I feel like they're fighting a losing battle. Like, I think that the right is heading in this direction, and I don't know if it can be stopped.
And they're shocked to find that it is. And you see, part of the irony, and I actually went back and when I wrote how the right lost its mind. This was 2017. Okay. And there's a whole section in there about Donald Trump and anti-Semitism, and how he'd sort of wink, wink, wink. You know, the whole Charlottesville, good people on both sides. These people were, marching with tiki torches, saying, the Jews will not replace us. Um, but I went back and I looked at that, and back in 2016, 2017, who understood the threat, who was really alarmed by it? Ben Shapiro. Now, Ben
Hmm.
Shapiro had eventually come around, like, okay, I'm going to support Donald Trump. But the thing is that he knew how dangerous this was at that time, which
Hmm.
makes, in many ways, his bending of the knee worse and a little bit more, I don't know. And
Yeah.
yeah, he's pushing back against it now. But are you really surprised, Ben? Are you really surprised that this is happening? Because back in 2017, you knew it. In fact,
Yeah.
almost every Jewish Republican who pushed back on Donald Trump got that really vicious blowback. You remember? I don't know what you got, but I got it. I remember seeing on social media a Photoshop picture of Donald Trump, pressing a button with me in a gas chamber, and he's
Yep.
wearing a German uniform. And virtually every Never Trump Republican was put into a gas chamber at one time or another. So this was not a mystery. This was not something that was obscure. This is what I don't understand, that if you actually saw that potential threat, how would you ever come around, ever, ever, ever,
I,
to
I think
supporting
it.
that? So
I
it's a
think it's
business.
if you. Well, which itself could be like playing into a stereotype. I don't want to do that. But look, let's just be honest. If you want to be a big time right wing, or even now conservative, we use the term very loosely,
Yeah.
conservative
Yeah.
influencer, podcaster, who are the top? Like Tucker Carlson, Candace Owens. I mean,
Really? So,
you, I think so. I mean, like, if if you want to make it to the top in that genre,
yeah.
you've
Uh,
got to kind of like, you have to at least be mean to black people. You have to at least be like very much anti-trans, like not just like what
oh
you and
yeah,
I
yeah,
have said, not just what you and I have said, Charlie, which is like you shouldn't, if
yeah.
you're a biological male, you shouldn't be playing. Or no, you have to be like, this has to be an obsession with you. And then I think increasingly a sine qua non, I believe is the term, is anti-Semitism, at least flirting
Well, I
with it.
mean, yeah. Well, I mean, look, there's a guy. Did you? I don't know if you have a chance, but people ought to go read David French's piece in the New York Times yesterday, where
Did read it. Yep.
he talks about how he stumbles into this chat room where they're all like, ripping him as a conservative or something like that, and he has some insight into this whole sort of post liberal conservatism where it's like you have to be the strong man, and the strong man can't care about small L liberal things like free speech and due process because, weak men, create these crises, and we need to understand what time it is, and that America is going in the toilet. Everything everything is totally shitty because of weak men who are not strong, muscular Americans who return us to our glory days. And the thing about Jews are intellectuals and they're cosmopolitan. They're rootless cosmopolitans, I believe. That I'm not sure what the term in German is for rootless cosmopolitan, but you can see that coming back. That there's this sense of that you need to be strong and muscular, and if you are weak on any of these issues, then you are the enemy. So
Yep. And I got to again say, look, there were bad things and before Trump on the right, but man, he really elevated them. He really helped
we brought them back in.
popularize them. And the whole thing of the masculinity, that's just like bullshit. Like, hey man, you got to be like a tough, like that. Trump really brought that back. I mean, to a
No,
way that, yeah,
any place. Look, I mean, there was a time. I mean, anti-Semitism has been around for a very very long time. Donald Trump did not invent it. Nobody, it has been. that recessive gene going way back. But starting in the 1960s, there was a tremendous effort to exile them, to push the mouth breathers out. And the main thing that you and I are talking about here is that Donald Trump and MAGA opened the door for the mouth breathers to come back in, and that the people who had been at the very fringe, edges of the conspiracy, of the fever swamps are now mainstream in MAGA. And when you have the president and the vice president who are explicitly refusing to condemn them, that's a moment, and that is
Yeah.
dangerous. And particularly among young people, look, the kids are not all right. There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of concern. And when you have that kind of anxiety, there is that effort to figure out who do we blame for that. So I don't.
And there's no gatekeepers too. I mean, like, would Tucker or if Tucker or Candace, if the only way they could be famous or relevant was to get on TV, like let's say YouTube doesn't exist,
Mm,
podcasting doesn't exist, the social media doesn't exist. We'll go back 20 years ago. The only way you could be famous as a conservative is to be like a conservative commentator on the old Fox News, CNN, MSNBC. Would Tucker still be saying the things he's saying today? Would Candace be saying the things? Or would they be trying to fit in? Which raises the question, like, how much of this is for business reasons, or has it just enabled them to actually say what they like? Were they always phonies? I don't even know where
I
how
don't
to
know. I
answer
mean,
that.
I remember when somebody told me. I was at a conference and somebody said, and this was before Charlie Kirk was murdered. And this was somebody who was engaging on campuses. And I remember the first time someone said, Nick Fuentes is the coming thing. He's making a play for the Charlie Kirk, the Charlie Kirk mantle. And I was just amazed thinking, like, who who is interested in neo-Nazi ideas? And by the way, let's not can we not gloss over the fact that the anti-Semitism on the left is a real problem. And I know that people don't do this that both sides said. No, you really need to understand that in fact in this horseshoe theory, this is a real danger. And every what you and I have done in the past is we've been willing to call out people on our own side. Not enough people have been willing to call out people on their own side. There is that sense of if you're on the right, no enemies to the right. Well, on the left, it's no enemies to the left. It is essential that principled liberals call out people on their own side who might be drifting into this. You can despise Benjamin Netanyahu and be thoroughly appalled by what they're doing in Gaza, but it does not justify some of the rhetoric that is out there. And it is toxic rhetoric, and you see it playing out in Australia and in other places. So again, I don't want to make this like we're just. I mean, I think the anti-Semitism on the right is incredibly dangerous. I agree with you. It appears to be metastasizing, but let's not pretend. If you pretend that there's no left-wing anti-Semitism, then nothing will be done about it, and it will metastasize on the left as well. And this is one of the things: is that can we have a coalition of the decent? It's going to reject it on both sides because it's urgently necessary that happens right now.
Amen. All right. I could talk more about this. We should probably
Yeah.
move on. Otherwise, we're just going to be like super depressing show.
Yeah.
Um, so here's some positive news. Indiana GOP rejects Trump's map and major blow to his gerrymandering push. Indiana Republicans withstood immense pressure from Donald Trump, ignoring anonymous threats on their lives as they defeated his plan to redraw the state's congressional map. The
Big
failed
deal.
vote is the culmination of a brass-knuckled 4-month pressure campaign. 4 months, Charlie. The hesitant local lawmakers held out in spite of pipe bombs, unsolicited pizza deliveries, and swattings of their homes, and lots of threats, even coming. But the Heritage Foundation, that's the funny one. Did you see this? Heritage Action sent out a tweet saying, like, you're going to regret it. You're going to. That actually was fun to watch.
Oh,
Instant.
okay, well, let's just talk about this. I mean, this is Heritage Action, which is sort of the the Brute Squad for the Heritage Foundation, Project 2025, they put out a threat saying Donald Trump has made it clear that if you don't go along with this gerrymandering plan, he will cut off all federal aid to the entire state of Indiana. No money for roads, no money for guard stations. All of those things would be cut. Now, the lieutenant governor of Indiana has basically suggested the same thing, that these threats are real. They actually happen,
Yep.
which, by the way, Matt, should be a scandal in and of itself.
Yep.
Was the president really threatening to punish the entire state of Indiana? Was he prepared to abuse his power to get his political end? I don't know whether
That
it's
in and
called
of
log.
itself would have
This
been
is
a
this was
huge
yes,
scandal.
right. This in and of itself, this is an act of pure political extortion. And look, it backfired badly. It's a very big deal. It backfired badly. I know that you and I have both thought about this, that over the last 10 years, if you had more Republicans who would stand together and push back against it, that would have been a good thing. Our history would have been dramatically different. But maybe it's a blip. Maybe it's just another bump in the road. But that those kinds of threats have worked for
Yeah.
Donald Trump up until that point where they didn't work anymore, and they did not work in Indiana.
And I think, look, I don't want to take anything away from their courage, because this took a lot of courage, as I've just described.
It did.
Also, there was a senator who had a daughter with Down syndrome,
Yeah. Yeah.
who was offended by Trump's using the R word slur. So there was a lot of principled opposition. I think it took a lot of courage, and I do not in any way want to, diminish from that. But I would also say this also comes after Donald Trump has a 36% approval rating, after Republicans keep losing special elections and underperforming. And so I do feel like, nothing succeeds like success, and success is contagious, and so is losing. There was a perception that Trump was kind of unbeatable and might even get a third term. I wonder if these Indiana Republicans would have had as much resolve uh, if we were at a different, if this had happened, say, 9 months ago, when Donald Trump was just rolling over everybody, and everyone was
Well,
bowing to him.
yeah, and now there's blood in the water. And you're seeing this in Washington, D.C. in a much smaller way, where more Republicans are willing to sign discharge petitions. The House of Representatives voted to reject one of his executive orders, which is just unthinkable. To reject the executive order of your own party on a vote that, where you had, I think, more than a dozen Republicans voting with the Democrats. And this is about collective bargaining rights for federal employees. So you are seeing some of those cracks. And I don't know that you would see that if, in fact, the poll numbers were not so terrible, and they weren't not losing those elections. And by the way, I had actually speculated a few months ago on a cable television show that Donald Trump has created a bubble for himself. Maybe he doesn't know how unpopular he is. Maybe he's not seeing his poll numbers. Over the weekend, we got a hint that somebody walked in and showed him his poll numbers on
Yeah.
the economy. Did you see that one big
Yeah.
tweet, or not tweet, the social media bleed, where the president of the United States is whining, why am I not getting more credit about this? I mean, it was kind of low energy and a lot of
Mm,
whiny bitch energy in Donald
totally.
Trump being upset that the American people do not understand how wonderful he is. So
And his economy, because now he's saying, well, we don't really want prices to come down, because that's deflation. That's worse than inflation. And besides, the energy prices are so low, and so he's very much trying to cope, as my kids might say. It's copium, and he is moving the goalposts. But I think clearly the whole thing about, like, well, we don't want prices to come down too much. Something he's rattled, like someone has
did
gotten to him. But I want to go back to these Indiana Republicans. There will be an attempt at retribution from them, and it could be
absolutely
TPUSA, it would be the Club for Growth. There's going to be millions of dollars spent trying to primary them. And I think the
right.
best hope that they have is we all hold hands and jump off together.
Yes,
If we can get enough people being brave around the country, it's going to be very
critical
difficult.
mass. Yes,
Exactly.
collective action, critical mass, absolutely central to successful resistance. Yes,
Like charging an attacker. They can't take us all out. You know what I mean? And by the way, let's have some, kudos for the. We started with Australia. We didn't mention the guy who disarmed the shooter. Talk about the bravery of, charging someone. This guy actually got shot in the process, but that's real heroism.
Real
Um,
kind
yeah,
amazing video. If you haven't seen it, yeah.
yeah. I know it's a weird non sequitur, but maybe it's not a non sequitur actually.
Well, I mean,
Courage under fire, my friend.
I actually saw a quote yesterday, last night, and maybe it was, but it's something like, it's really remarkable how common physical courage is and how rare moral courage is. But that kind of physical courage is still impressive. But yeah, what you saw in Indiana was more political and moral courage, just to stand up. And by the
Yeah,
way, there's more and more evidence that this whole redistricting, gerrymandering coup by the Republicans is just it's not playing out the way they expected. It's
yeah,
may turn out to be a wash. They may have miscalculated badly in Texas. And when you think about how much energy the Republicans put into this,
yeah,
your sense though, there are a lot of Republicans who are going, we are in deep shit in these midterm elections because that one trump card is turning out to be a dud for them, or may turn out to be.
yeah. No, this could be bad for this could backfire. Not only that it's a wash, this could actually help Democrats. There's a theory. So part of the problem is so Republicans had all Texas was already gerrymandered pretty much, right? So they try to squeeze out five more seats, five more seats, right? And so they take these five Democratic House seats and they make them more Republican. But the numbers they're looking at are the 2024 numbers when Donald Trump, A, was on the ballot, B, won, and C, overperformed amongst Hispanics in 2024. And so I think the Republican assumption when they started this plan was the wind is at our back, Donald Trump can't be defeated, and these Hispanic voters are now ours. So they made these districts
Nope,
something
nope, nope,
like
nope.
Trump.
Hmm.
Now these districts are now like Trump plus, let's say, 10. Okay. Well, what happens if Democrats are overperforming by 13 points the way that they did in Tennessee a few weeks ago? Now, all of a sudden, not only do you lose the five Democratic seats you were trying to steal, but you have other members who could now become more susceptible because they had to water down their district in order to
Water
get
down
these.
them.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah,
So
I
this
mean,
could
basically,
end up,
you have these super compact districts. Okay, absolutely, solidly red, solidly blue. When redistrict, they become more competitive on both sides.
yeah.
So yeah, it's one thing to be a 60% Republican district. It's another thing if you're down to like 55%. Normally, that's pretty safe, but 10-point margin may not be enough in a wave election.
It may not. And, down the road, this might work out fine for Republicans. But in 2026, I mean, I think it's probably now a foregone conclusion that Democrats take the House, barring some crazy
Yeah.
external
Yep.
event. The Senate, I think the Senate's still tough. And I don't want to anger anybody again, but as we discussed last week, Texas
Did
may
you
have
get did
gotten.
you did you get a lot of shit for that the Jasmine Crockett stuff?
I got a little shit, but
No.
mostly what I got was my video not performing well because
Oh,
unlike you, Charlie, I made the mistake of headlining the YouTube
saw
video
that.
that I put up
Yeah.
about the Texas race, and there's a real danger in what we do you know now luckily we're not avoiding controversial topics, but my mistake was, I think, headlining it with the wrong thing. But there is a
No,
danger
no,
that we
no.
start to do fan service, that we start to self edit and only talk about things that people want to hear.
Well, that's
Um,
right. And that's a
yeah,
danger for them too. People will normally say, "I don't want to be in a bubble," but the reality is that a lot of people do want to be in a bubble, and it's not a mistake, Matt, to basically give them some tough love and to say you
yeah,
understand that this is not actually going to do it. But this is kind of tough in the new media, and I love the new media being independent. We don't have corporate overlords, but there is that danger of audience capture and fan service, and you see a lot of it.
yeah.
And what happens is a reluctance to engage in hard truths like, okay, you may not want to hear this, but it's really important that you do. And people go swipe, click. No, I
Or
don't. I
they
don't
don't
want.
even,
I don't want you. Yeah.
or they don't even see it because the first 100 people that were served this headline
Yeah.
normally click on our stuff, didn't click on it. And then the rest of the people didn't even get it, maybe because of the way I don't know the algorithm. You might know it better than me, but
But ultimately, if we don't tell people the truth, what's the point of doing this? I mean,
exactly.
seriously, it's like we're going to fight for democracy, but we're not going to tell you, give you the benefit of our. Now, look, you're free to disagree. I mean, this is the thing. I mean, we're not expecting that everybody agrees with everything we say, but um, we have a lot of history here from the last 10 years. I think we've learned some stuff, and then we can have a debate about it. And I think that one of the worst things for democracy is that people like don't even want to hear the other point of view. They don't even want to have a debate, have a discussion, because especially given the stakes in the era of Trump, you need to have a reality check once in a while. And that reality check is not always going to confirm all of your priors, right? So
Speaking of speaking truth to power and redistricting, did you see this? Rand Paul talking about the problems with gerrymandering. And he says, we have one Democrat area in Louisville and we have a Democrat congressman talking about Kentucky. We could carve up Louisville and get rid of that one congressman. But how does that make Democrats feel? I think it makes them feel more like they're not represented.
right.
That is very smart, very true, very responsible, very prudent. Um,
Rand
and it's
Paul.
surprising to hear. But hey, let's give him credit where credit's due, right?
Well, I mean, honestly, I was looking at some numbers on what's going on with young voters and their amount of anxiety, and I think we need to understand that we are in potentially sort of revolutionary times where there's so many people who are so alienated, and they are losing faith in liberal democracy. I mean, this is a crisis of liberal democracy. There are a lot of people that don't think the process works anymore. In a thoroughly gerrymandered world, you will have half the population that will feel, "What's the point of elections? I'm not represented anyway. I, I, there's nothing that I can do that's going to change it through the democratic process." So, if you really want to destroy faith in liberal democracy, you keep going down this road where you disenfranchise larger and larger groups of people because if you can't do it at the ballot box, what are the alternatives? So, I think there's been a lot of loose talk about, American Civil War and everything. But the reality is that when people decide that, this is just not working, it's not working for me, and there's nothing I can do through the normal electoral process, what do we think is going to happen?
Imagine, Charlie, someone decides they're going to pick up our weekly show and they're going to broadcast it on MS Now, let's say, an hour, Mondays at 10 a.m. And let's say that you decided, I'm just going to steamroll Matt Lewis. I'm we're going to be on TV. I'm going to talk for 52 minutes out of the 60 minutes, and I'm going to steamroll this guy. I'm going to get all the attention. You could totally do it, and it would work. Um, but what about next week, right? I'm hoping we're having a show next week and the week after that and the week after that. I want to keep this show going, this conversation going. And I know you do too. And so, I mean, I don't think you would do that anyway because you're a nice guy, but it wouldn't even make smart business sense because we want to keep the conversation going. Well, that's how I feel about liberal democracy too. Like, it's not just about this one election or winning the argument today. Liberal democracy, America, is a conversation, an experiment I want to keep going. But to keep it going, we have to keep the other guy in the game a little bit. You know what I mean? I'm not saying we have to let
I
him win
do.
every time. We got to
I
keep
do.
him in the game.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I also think that people do need to understand that there are occasionally, legitimate points to be made on the other side of the argument. I think it was William F. Buckley who said, what was his great quote about liberals? That liberals say they're open-minded and then are shocked to find out that there is actually a different point of view.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and again, the stakes are so high that if you put your head in the sand and you go, I don't want to hear anything bad about crime or immigration or trans athletes. I just don't want to hear that we've ever done anything wrong, that we've made any mistakes. Um, well, then, you know, you probably shouldn't be that shocked that we have the kind of results that we've had. And I'm almost looking past the 2026 election to think that, Democrats could win and then misinterpret the midterms, because unless they course correct on certain key issues, 2028 is still going to be a challenge. And as we've discovered, the presidential election is the whole ball game. It's the
Mhm.
Supreme Court. It's all the executive powers. It's everything. So
The
again,
good news is,
when we do these things, it's
yeah,
because we understand how important it is to win these elections.
absolutely. Well, the good news is, hopefully Trump won't be on the ballot, and I do think he has this charisma that cannot be replicated. There's going to be a civil war probably on the right. You can see it emerging. But no, Democrats have to get their act together. And I think they can win in 2026 without getting their act together, without really coming to a consensus on some big issues. But in 2028, that gets much tougher. And by the way, I mean, you know, if affordability is the most important thing, do Democrats have a plan to fix that in if they were to win in 2028? Because otherwise, the same thing will happen to them that happened to Donald Trump, which is you get elected on affordability, and all of a sudden you have no plan to fix it either. So at some point, I know this is wildly premature, but it does help to have some ideas and you know some
Yes.
plans.
Right. At some point,
Speaking,
you have to explain, and you have to explain it in a credible way, which is going to be a challenge for Democrats because obviously, let's be honest about it, they did contribute to inflation during the
definitely,
Biden years. And by the way, if people are saying, I'm not going to listen to you guys because you should never say anything about the Biden years, there are a lot of lessons there that need to be learned. And that's one of them.
absolutely. Um, and as you know, Charlie, I wrote all about it at the time, and I know you did too.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Here's a
A lot
lesson.
of things.
I'm going to punch right now. You punch left, I'll punch right. You hippie punch, I'll fascist punch. Um, Here's a lesson that when I was talking about having a plan, being able to fix
Yeah.
something. Healthcare. Republicans are still 2 weeks away, but they're still 2 weeks away now, Charlie, from having a plan to repeal and replace Obamacare, or to at least, you know, um, get those subsidies back in place, because my healthcare costs are going up dramatically. Here's my theory on this. My theory is, remember when Ted Cruz, I think it was in 2013, maybe, did
I
that
do remember.
filibuster. And Ted Cruz was right about something. He said, if we don't stop Obamacare from being implemented now, it's over. It's
Mhm.
it's it's going to take root, because you can't unwind it. Once people
Yeah,
start to
of course he is.
rely on
And he
it.
was right in that sense, although he
He
had
was
no
right in that
plan to
sense.
stop it. Yeah. Yeah.
So I believe that the fundamental problem now is that Americans, that the question is settled. Is it the responsibility of government to maybe not provide health care, but to provide access to affordable health care, health insurance, which leads to health care, that you cannot be discriminated against for a pre-existing condition? I believe that it is now the consensus in America that, yes, it is government's responsibility to do that, right? For better or worse, that is now baked into the cake, okay? The problem for
I don't
Republicans
disagree.
is Republicans have not come to terms with that yet.
Yeah.
Not Some of them have, but not all of them have. And so, as a result, until they accept that premise and then say, okay, that's the premise, how can we create a more conservative version of Obamacare that actually meets the standard of requirements that the American public now has come to expect? Until they accept that premise, it's impossible for them to actually repeal and replace. They have no replacement, and I believe it goes back to this original problem, this original, like, faulty thing. Like, how do you fix something if you can't even agree that it's broken?
Okay, no, I agree with you. And the other problem in fixing it, of course, is that it's incredibly complicated. It's incredibly detail oriented. And Republicans right now are not that interested in governing, if you had noticed. I mean, Donald Trump is not going to get into the weeds to come up with a plan. And in terms of, the thinkers in the party, the Heritage Foundation folks, they're not interested in coming up with something workable based on that premise. So I don't see how they're going to get their way out of it. Um, and I mean, and this thing is just roaring down the tracks. And obviously, people are going to have that sticker shock, and it's going to be a big story in January. But of course, Donald Trump wants to change the subject. So today, big news, he's going to, because he's not going to legalize pot, but he's going to greenlight a completely new category for marijuana. And I am very interested to hear how the conservative base reacts to all of that.
Mm,
Now, as a
yeah.
more libertarian conservative, I have no problem with it whatsoever.
Mm,
I absolutely think it's ridiculous that we continue to sort of pretend, the evil weed type thing. Virtually how many states have now legalized recreational use of marijuana? There's a Matt, you're talking about consensus. There's a consensus now in the American people, and I'm sorry to tell you this, that pot should be legal, and we are not going back to a time when people are going, no, that demon weed. If somebody has smoked marijuana, they should be disqualified from public life. And that's another one of those consensuses that, but it
mm.
is going to be. How do you think it's going to play out with the traditional
Well,
conservative base? Because
can we just put a
I
pin?
sense some skepticism on your part.
I am. Let me just put a pin on it real quick because I want to go back to
Okay,
healthcare for
okay.
1 second. My concern is, I wonder. Let me ask you this question with healthcare, and then I want to go to the weed thing. Is there a chance that the same Democrats who wimped out and reopened the government will wimp out and give Republicans an out by voting for some bullshit version that solves their political problem with ACA without actually solving the premium problem?
No, because I don't think they'll have that option. Now, there might be a coalition that will just extend the premium support, sort of a clean type thing. That's conceivable. I could see them doing that through a discharge petition or something like that. Whether that gets through the Senate, I don't know. Will Donald Trump sign that? If he's smart, he would just simply sign it. So that might happen. I'm not sure that that's a total wimp out. I mean, that actually
Yeah.
provides relief to
I think I
Americans who
think
need
the
the relief.
reason I think the out is Democrats will insist on 2 or 3 years and
Yeah,
Republicans won't. But I'm telling you, if Democrats were smart, they have to preserve this issue. The same reason that Donald Trump wouldn't let Democrats fix the border.
yeah,
Democrats, purely Machiavellian here.
yes,
Republicans now own like Democrats win on this issue and Republicans created this problem. And if you give them an escape hatch, I think that is political malpractice. Luckily for Democrats, I don't think Republicans are going to be organized enough or united enough to pull that maneuver off.
no, I think you're probably right.
All right. I disagree with you on weed. Um,
Here you go. Here we
yeah,
go.
I
You're
disagree
the
with you on
young guy.
weed. Yeah, well, I don't know about that. Not anymore. Um, so I'm kind of, it's weird. I'm kind of with the traditional conservatives on a lot of the stuff like online betting. I think is a real problem.
Yeah,
Marijuana. Now, look, I don't really care if someone like grows it or like. My problem is that like I was for 10 years ago. I wrote a piece at the Daily Caller. I was for decriminalizing possession of marijuana.
yeah. Okay.
Okay. But since then, it went from decriminalizing to commercializing.
Right.
These things are now being run by big profit driven companies who are
Yeah.
making weed more potent, more powerful than they've ever been. They're commercializing it, they're pushing it, they're selling it. I think it ties into a lot of problems in America today. I wonder, honestly, how much of our political dysfunction maps onto the availability of marijuana in America, that people are becoming like more weird, more paranoid. Um, I think that it is a problem with young people whose brains are developing. And then on top of that, Charlie, it's not just these dispensaries, but there are other places popping up that are now selling all sorts of weird like vape products and kratom. Do you know about this kratom stuff? It's really so the only reason I kind of know about it, my wife Erin has a podcast called The Poisoning, and it's
Hmm.
started off being primarily about fentanyl because it's not with fentanyl. It's not overdose. It's you're literally being poisoned. Most people who die of
Yeah,
it
totally.
don't
Yeah.
know they've taken it. But throughout the couple years that she's been doing this podcast, it's kind of expanded, and so it's probably changed my view of it the more I've learned and heard about it. But to the political question, why is Donald Trump? I feel like Donald Trump is kind of going against the conservative base here. You know, he
He's
wants to
never
let
been conservative. I mean, the thing
yeah.
is, this is the key thing. Donald Trump he's not conservative. Even Rush Limbaugh, before he died, recognized that Donald Trump's not a conservative. Look, there's a lot of things going on in American society, the dumbing down of American education, the warping of children's brains because of social media. There's some social media stories out about, the amount of time, like a quarter, like 1 out of 4 eighth graders in this country spends more than 7 hours a day on social media. Okay, that is melting their brains. There's a lot of things happening. The only, the only case you can make against, that marijuana is having a negative effect is if you say, unlike, say, alcohol, because, somebody who goes home and consumes, 3 or 4 whiskeys, we're not talking about anybody here in the room here, um, as opposed to, having a gummy, what is the case to say that gummies are, the saliva of Satan? Let's go have, another gin and tonic. And prohibition works so well. You see, to your point about healthcare, we're not going back to prohibition. It's too late. The door is open, and I think that what Donald Trump is doing is, rather than leading, he's following.
Mhm.
He understands where public opinion has gone on this. He understands where the marketplace has gone, and yes, this stuff about, the big companies are pushing this. You could be talking about potato chips. Like, what in our
Yeah.
society
Do
is
you
not?
think
So,
should Jeff Bezos start selling heroin? He could probably make a killing doing that, right?
okay, see what you did there, a little bait and switch. We weren't talking
Well,
heroin. We're not talking crack. We're not talking meth. We're talking THC. We're talking
but you
CBD and things like that.
and you limit it there though. That nothing
Okay.
else. We don't use that to like
Well,
slippery slope.
hey, 1967 is calling, Matt, and once it's talking going back, that marijuana is the gateway drug. You start off, having a toke, and before you know it, you're sitting there, you're shooting up in an alley. No, I don't think so.
Here's where I'm with the. I don't even know. Is it traditional conservative? I don't know what we would call them, but here's where I kind of agree with them. Like, I mean, marijuana is a little different because we did kind of have a national conversation about it, although I think it was an dishonest conversation because I didn't realize that decriminalizing meant commercializing. But I feel like
Oh,
just
really?
in the
Me
past
too.
decade, which maybe coincidentally maps with the craziness in our politics, or maybe it's who knows if it just causation or correlation. But like think about like if the online gambling now, the social media that we're being pushed to and fed, the fear of missing out and envy that we get from Instagram, if you're a young person especially. God knows what AI is about to do. How about this? Like, what's
Oh,
it called? Klarna or whatever, this pay as you go, these apps where like literally you're like taking out a friggin' loan to buy a pizza or something. Like, there have been a lot of these changes. And I think legalization of and commercialization of marijuana among them, I just, I think we just need to slow things down. And if you're a young person right now,
I
wow.
okay. I agree and disagree. And I think the fact that you changed the subject is an indication that focusing on marijuana is not a winning issue.
No,
I
I
want
see it
it
as part of
done.
a, I
I
see it
understand,
as a
and I
broad.
agree. Right, and social conservatives see a lot of these things, and a lot of it is legitimate. The question is, where do you point? Like, okay, Australia. Australia's just now banned social media for kids below a certain age. One state after another is banning cell phones in classes and stuff. I think these are positive things. I think a lot of these things are really, can be addressed. Um, but kind of just to throw that in, and again, make a principled argument why we should, you know, marijuana bad, booze good. I mean, it's just, and I think that's where people's heads are at.
Yeah,
Um,
but I would
what
just
is the
say,
social cost of legalized alcohol? What is the social impact of legalized alcohol? It is horrendous, and
yeah.
yet
But then
you're
would
not going
we
to go
okay,
back
but
to
but
prohibition.
would we look at that and say, let's find another vice to alcohol's not bad enough. It's not killing enough people, it's not wrecking enough homes. Let's find another thing to legalize or to again, and the legalizing thing I was for, but now
Yeah.
I feel I mean, you know how it is, Charlie. You go anywhere, you smell weed everywhere.
Oh,
It
in your hometown, yeah, DC. I was nowhere. It was where was I? I was in Times Square last week in New York. It was amazing. You step out of the hotel and it's like, wow. Have you people never heard of, you know, gummies? Have you never heard of, brownies or something? Is everybody smoking? But I do think there's also a possibility that there's a replacement going on. The people who used to, drink will now use different sorts of things. And yes, are there negative
yeah.
consequences? Of course there are. But at a certain point, people are going to make choices, and that's already happened. So the
There's
question
also
now, I think, is is
I'm
is
sorry,
whether you regulate it and tax it
yeah.
in a way that is responsible.
The other point I would make is, and I listened to about a year ago, the New York Times Daily podcast did a really good episode on this. The I'm not adept at talking about this, but just the psychological impact that weed has on, especially young people, but like a lot of people, can bring about like a psychosis and a paranoia that I don't think, unless you are majorly an alcoholic, I don't think that's a problem. But there is a psychosis and and especially people who are already struggling with mental health. You think that I'm sounding like he was on marijuana cigarettes, but like reefer madness or something, Charlie. But no, I think this is a real problem that like there are people, vulnerable people out there who are struggling with mental health, and weed is actually like very bad for them.
I'm actually looking forward to the YouTube video Matt Lewis's Reefer Madness. Look, you could say that about the abuse of many things. I will enjoy a Cabernet tonight if I drank two bottles of that Cabernet and then followed it up with half a bottle of cognac. Really bad things would happen to me. If in excess or abuse, does that mean though that it's not part of the culture? And again, I want to go back to the point you made about healthcare. This argument is basically already over. I mean, Americans have accepted this. It is part of the culture. The thing is now, how do we make it more? How do we make it, more responsible? By the way, do you remember that column that was written many years ago from Maureen Dowd, where she
Hmm.
she
She
goes to
took a gummy
Colorado?
or a yeah.
Well, no, she actually had one of those big blocks of chocolate,
Mm,
and you're only supposed to have like one piece of the chocolate. And she goes into her hotel room and she eats a piece, nothing happens. Eats another piece, nothing happens. Eats another piece, nothing happens. Basically, eats the whole bar, and nothing happens. So she orders a Chablis from room service. By the time the Chablis is, the guy comes through the door, suddenly all of this stuff has hit her. She's paranoid. She's curled up in a ball in the room because she ate the whole freaking thing, probably 10 times
mm,
the dose she's supposed to take. Okay, there's the warning. You abuse something and bad things are going to happen. On the other hand, had she just had the one, would society be crumbling? Look, we are faced with a lot of other things. And by the way, the the AI, what's coming on AI? Okay, so I saw an ad the other day. You want to talk about something to worry about? I'm telling you, AI porn is going to be
mm.
something and we're gonna have a hard time writing about it because nobody wants to say they saw it. But I saw this ad like build her, blank her, delete her. And I'm thinking, okay, so is there a whole generation of men who go, I can actually talk about objectifying women and then discarding them. Why go through the problem of actually creating relationships or showing respect? Why actually even watch normal porn when I can create my own
Mm.
sex slaves? Wow, we're going to look back on this, a couple of decades, and you could still be out there, yelling at the clouds about, reefer madness when there are other things that are way more serious, Matt.
Wait till the robots show up, man. It's going to get wild. The
They're going to be here
AI
next week.
robots. Yeah.
Absolutely, they're going to be here. See, I just think that it's funny because I remember when I was in Colorado a couple of years ago, and was at one of these dinners where pretty much everybody was over 60 years old, and one of the conversations I heard some people were talking about, like, I have joint pain and I'm using this pill or this smoking and thing, and it became very obvious that among senior citizens, everybody at this table, in Colorado, was using something with pot. I mean, with
Hmm.
marijuana, and it had become so mainstream that there's no alternative world in which they're going to say let's go back to pretending that marijuana is like heroin or meth.
No, I don't think that. I don't think it's like heroin or meth, but maybe I'm just an old fashioned, curmudgeon, Charlie. But I miss
You just need to
Mayberry.
come. You live in. Is it legal where you live? And
I don't honestly don't know. To be honest, I have no idea. Probably. I think it's pretty much legal everywhere. And, you know, we should do an episode. We'll get half baked and do this. I'll
you
probably be
know what?
more coherent then.
I think that a couple of gummies would change your mind. That's all I'm saying. I just
All right, my
we're joking.
friend.
We're all kidding you. It's a public policy debate. Seriously.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, any final thoughts, Charlie?
No. So is this the week we're going to hear some big stuff from the Supreme Court? Did we hear anything this morning? I mean, as soon as I get off, I'm going to go check Scotus blog and see what the court is inflicting on America. So
I don't know if we can use any more news at this point. I think we're our quota has been met for the week, so I'm
for the
good.
year, yeah, I
Yeah,
have some
for
bad
the
news
rest of
for
the
you.
year. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I agree with you. This would be a bipartisan consensus. Could we just have it's Christmas, between Christmas and New Year? Could we have a moratorium on any more news? I,
Yeah, remember how Donald Trump, like over, what was it, Veterans Day or something, disappeared
yeah,
for like 6 or 7 days?
yeah.
Like, that would be like a Festivus miracle if that could happen.
That would be a Festivus move.
All right, my friend. Well,
All right, thanks a lot.
good conversation. We'll see everyone back here next week.